The moment I saw the cheap cologne bottle rolling under the couch, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't mine. It wasn't the kind of thing Emily would buy for me, either. I leaned down, grabbed it, and turned it over in my hand, my mind racing through every possible explanation. Maybe it was a gift she got for someone and dropped. Maybe one of her friends had left it. But as I pulled off the cap and took a whiff, something in my gut twisted. I knew that scent, not because I'd ever worn it, but because I'd smelled it before, on someone else. I just couldn't place where. I sat there on the floor, staring at the bottle like it held all the answers, but I already knew it wouldn't. I wasn't the type to snoop through my wife's things, never had been, but now I had this gnawing feeling that if I didn't start, I'd be the only idiot left in the dark. So I stood up, walked into our bedroom, and opened her closet. Nothing unusual at first. Her neatly hung blouses, the shoes stacked just the way she liked them, the faint smell of her perfume in the air. But then I noticed something off. The small travel bag she always kept tucked away for weekend trips with her sister was missing. Emily wasn't on a trip. She was supposed to be at work. I checked the bathroom next, running my eyes over the counter, the shelves. Then I spotted it. Her toothbrush was gone. A bottle of her favorite shampoo missing. The face cream she never left behind, even if she was just going to a hotel for a night. Not there. My stomach dropped. People don't take a packed bag, their toothbrush, and their personal things unless they're planning to stay somewhere overnight. I sat on the edge of our bed, my mind going 100 miles an hour. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe she was staying at a friend's place. Maybe she forgot to tell me. Maybe. But deep down I knew something was going on, and the cologne was the first crack in the wall. Just then, the front door opened. I heard Emily's voice, light and casual, as she called out, "Hey babe, you home?" I took a deep breath, pushed the cologne bottle into my pocket, and got up. Yeah, I was home, and it was time to start getting some real answers. I walked out of the bedroom just as Emily was slipping off her shoes, her expression shifting when she saw me standing there. It was quick, barely a flicker, but I caught it. The hesitation, the way her mouth pressed into a thin line, the way her fingers twitched as she set down her purse. She hadn't expected me to be home. That much was obvious. She forced a smile, one of those practiced ones she used when she was trying to hide irritation, and tossed her keys onto the counter. "You're home early," she said, her voice carrying that fake casualness that people use when they're trying too hard. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my tone flat and neutral. Things wrapped up sooner than I thought. I waited to see if she'd ask about my day, maybe act like she cared, but instead, she just nodded, walked past me, and headed straight for the kitchen. No hug, no kiss, not even the usual small talk. Just a quick glance toward the hallway. Her movements too controlled, too careful. I followed her, leaning against the doorway as she pulled open the fridge and stared inside like she was looking for something, even though we both knew she wasn't. "Where were you?" I asked, keeping my voice calm even. She didn't flinch, didn't even pause as she grabbed a water bottle and twisted off the cap. "Work," she said before taking a sip, not bothering to turn around. I reached into my pocket, gripping the cologne bottle, feeling the plastic press against my fingers as I watched her. "You're sure about that?" She finally looked at me, her brow creasing like I'd just asked something ridiculous. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I found this under the couch." I pulled out the cologne and held it up. And I know it's not mine. For a second, she just stared at it, her lips parting slightly before she caught herself and shook her head. "Oh, that's probably my brother's. He was here last week, remember?" I nodded slowly, pretending to think about it. "Right, your brother. The one who hasn't been to our house in over a month." Her jaw tightened. "Then maybe it's from before that. You know how things get lost under furniture?" "Yeah, and I'm sure that's why your travel bag is missing too." That did it. That was the moment she realized I wasn't just throwing out random questions. Her shoulders stiffened, her grip tightening around the water bottle as she carefully set it down on the counter. "You went through my stuff?" "Yeah, I did," I said, my voice steady. "And I noticed your toothbrush is gone. Your shampoo. A few other things you always take when you're staying somewhere overnight." She let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You're unbelievable. I went to the gym this morning." "Okay." I showered there. "And I brought a bag because I needed a change of clothes." I folded my arms. And the toothbrush. She rolled her eyes, exhaling loudly. I bought a new one and forgot to put it back. Jesus, do you hear yourself right now? I did, and I knew she was lying. I could hear it in the way her voice had shifted, in the way she avoided eye contact just long enough to seem casual, but not long enough to be convincing. The way she crossed her arms like she was trying to turn the situation around, like I was the one who needed to explain myself. You're sure that's the truth? I asked. Yes, she snapped, her patience suddenly gone. I don't know what's gotten into you, but you need to calm down. You're acting insane. I nodded again, slipping the cologne back into my pocket. All right. She blinked, thrown off by my sudden agreement. All right, yeah. I shrugged. If that's the truth, then all right. I watched her, waiting to see if she'd relax, if she'd drop her guard now that she thought she'd shut me down. But she didn't. Instead, she picked up her phone from the counter and glanced at the screen like she was checking the time, but I saw her fingers tap against the side, unlocking it without opening anything. She was checking for messages, or maybe deleting them. Dinner, she asked, already moving to the fridge again. Not hungry, I said, pushing off the doorway and turning toward the bedroom. I've got some things to take care of. I could feel her watching me as I walked away, could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she tried to decide if I was buying her story or if I was on her. I didn't need to push further. Not yet. I already knew, and now I just had to prove it. I sat in the bedroom with the door slightly open, listening to Emily move around in the kitchen. I could hear the clatter of dishes, the faint hum of the refrigerator door opening and closing, and the occasional shuffle of her feet. Every now and then, there was a pause, long enough that I could picture her glancing at her phone again, debating whether to call or text whoever she was worried about. I wanted her to think I had let it go, that I had swallowed her excuses and walked away, but my mind was already working through my next move. I had no proof yet, but I was close. I needed to catch her in a lie she couldn't talk her way out of. I grabbed my laptop and opened up our shared bank account. Emily rarely used cash. She preferred swiping her card for everything. If she had been somewhere she didn't want me to know about, there would be a digital trail. I scrolled through the latest transactions, looking for anything out of place. Grocery store, gas station, a charge from the boutique she liked. Nothing suspicious. But then, just as I was about to close the tab, I saw it. A hotel charge from this morning. It wasn't a fancy place, just a mid-range business hotel about 20 minutes from our house. The kind of place someone might use for a quick stop instead of full night stay. The timestamp on the transaction was just after 9 in the morning, right around the time she had supposedly gone to the gym. My stomach tightened, my pulse quickened, but I forced myself to stay calm. There was no reason for her to be at a hotel in the morning unless she had been meeting someone. I didn't get up right away. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling the weight of it settle in. A part of me had still wanted to be wrong, to find some harmless explanation that made everything click back into place. But this was it. This was the confirmation. Emily had lied straight to my face, and now I had proof. The only question left was what I was going to do with it. I shut the laptop and walked back out into the kitchen. Emily was standing by the sink, rinsing a plate, her phone face down on the counter. She looked up when she saw me, her expression neutral, like nothing had happened, like she wasn't hiding anything. I thought you had stuff to do, she said, drying her hands on a towel. Yeah, I said, leaning against the counter. I was just checking our bank account. Her body tensed, just slightly, but she recovered quickly. Okay, I saw a charge for a hotel this morning, I said, keeping my voice even, watching her reaction closely. For a second, she didn't move. Then she let out a small laugh, shaking her head. Oh my God, you really are on one today. Explain it. She sighed, crossing her arms. I went there for a work thing. We had a meeting in one of the conference rooms. I told you we've been doing off-site meetings lately because the office is under renovation. That's interesting, I said, tilting my head, because you told me this morning you were going to the gym. The silence that followed was thick, stretching between us as she stared at me, her expression flickering between frustration and something else. Then just like that, she scoffed and rolled her eyes. I did go to the gym, she said, her voice clipped. After the meeting, I didn't think I needed to give you an exact itinerary of my morning. I let the words sit in the air for a moment, watching her shift her weight from one foot to the other. She was scrambling, trying to smooth over a lie that had already cracked wide open. I wasn't going to let her escape it this time. Which hotel was it? I asked. She frowned. What? The hotel. Which one was it? You saw the charge, she snapped. Why are you asking me? Because I want to hear you say it. Emily exhaled sharply, rubbing her temple like I was the one being unreasonable. It was the Maplewood Suites, she said finally. I nodded, pulling my phone from my pocket and typing in the name. That's funny, because the charge says you were at the Radford Inn. Her face paled. Just slightly. Just enough. That's what I meant, she said quickly. I got the name wrong. Jesus, you're acting like I committed a crime. I watched her for a long moment, letting the weight of her words settle between us. She was a good liar. Maybe she had even convinced herself that she could still get away with it. But I saw it now, clear as day. I saw the guilt, the panic, the way she couldn't meet my eyes for more than a second at a time. You're lying to me, I said quietly. Her mouth opened, then shut again. She shook her head. No, I'm not. I took a slow breath, gripping the edge of the counter to keep myself steady. Who were you with? I wasn't with anyone. Then why are you lying? She let out another sharp breath, her frustration mounting. Because you're being ridiculous, Steve. You're sitting here interrogating me like I did something wrong just because I had a meeting at a hotel. Do you even hear yourself? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the cologne bottle again, setting it on the counter between us. You still want to tell me this is your brother's? Emily stared at it, her lips pressing together so tightly they turned white. For a moment, I thought she might break, that she might finally tell the truth. But instead, she let out a cold, humorless laugh and shook her head. You know what? She said, grabbing her phone off the counter. I don't have to deal with this. She turned and started walking toward the hallway, but I stepped in front of her, blocking her path. You're not walking away from this, I said, my voice low. Her jaw clenched. Move? Not until you tell me the truth. For the first time, her mask cracked completely. The anger, the guilt, the fear, it all flickered across her face in an instant, and I knew. I knew without a doubt. I stepped aside, letting her pass. She stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door behind her. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at the closed door, feeling something inside me shift. The old me, the one who trusted her, who believed in her, was gone. Now, it was just a matter of deciding what to do next. I stood outside the bedroom door, my pulse hammering as I listened to the rustling of fabric, the sharp clicks of Emily's fingers tapping across her phone screen. She had locked herself inside the moment she stormed off, and I knew exactly what she was doing, trying to get her story straight, try to reach out to whoever the hell she had been with, trying to figure out how to spin this into something that would make me the bad guy. My patience had run out. I had given her every opportunity to tell me the truth, and every time, she chose to lie. I knocked once, not because I needed permission, but to give her a warning. Open the door, Emily. No response, just the sound of movement, hurried and tense, like she was stuffing something out of sight. I tried again, keeping my voice steady, controlled. Emily, open the damn door. A long pause, then a sigh, and finally the click of the lock. When the door swung open, she was standing there with her arms crossed, her face set in something halfway between defiance and exhaustion. The phone was still in her hand, the screen dimmed, and I could see the faint red imprint of where she had been gripping it too tightly. What do you want now? She said, her voice flat. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. Who were you texting? Her expression barely flickered. No one. I nodded, my jaw tightening. Give me the phone. She scoffed, shaking her head as she shoved it into her pocket. You're out of your mind if you think I'm handing you my phone. You're deleting messages. She let out a laugh, short and humorless. Jesus, Steve, do you hear yourself? You're acting like some paranoid lunatic. You want me to dump out my pockets too? Search me? Maybe you should get a warrant while you're at it. I held out my hand, refusing to engage with the theatrics. Give me the phone. She stared at me for a long moment, her fingers twitching at her sides. No, that was it. That was all I needed to hear. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair as I took a step back, forcing myself to think through the rage burning in my chest. You know what? It doesn't even matter anymore. She frowned. What? I don't need your phone. I already know everything I need to know. She opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. I pulled out my own phone, tapped a few buttons, and turned the screen toward her. The hotel's confirmation email, with her name, the date, the check-in time, all of it sitting there in black and white. For the first time, real panic flashed across her face. Not anger, not irritation, actual, undeniable fear. You went through my emails? I didn't have to. You used our shared account, Emily. You were sloppy. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting away, her mind clearly scrambling for an excuse, a justification, something that would get her out of this. It's not what you think. I felt a sharp, bitter laugh rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Then what is it? Tell me, because I'd love to hear what innocent explanation you've got for checking into a hotel in the middle of the morning while you were supposed to be at the gym. She hesitated, her lips parting, but no words came. For the first time since this started, she had nothing. Say it, Emily. My voice was quieter now, the heat in it replaced with something colder. Go ahead. Lie to me one more time. Her fingers curled into fists, her breathing uneven. She couldn't do it. I watched her shoulders slump, watched her entire body seem to deflate as she exhaled shakily and sank down onto the edge of the bed. Her hands went to her face, pressing against her forehead like she could physically block out the reality of this moment. I messed up, she whispered. I felt my whole body go still. For all the lies, all the back and forth, all the ways she had tried to dodge and manipulate the conversation, this was the first honest thing she had said. How long? My voice was tight, controlled, but I could feel the rage barely being held back beneath it. She let out a hollow laugh, rubbing her temples. Does it matter? Yeah, it does. She swallowed, her gaze still fixed on the floor. A couple of months. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to breathe through the sudden wave of nausea that rolled through me. A couple of months. While I had been going to work every day, while I had been making dinner, cleaning the house, sitting next to her on the couch, sleeping beside her in our bed, she had been doing this. Who is it? She shook her head, squeezing her eyes shut. Steve. Who is it? Her lips pressed together, and for a second, I thought she was going to refuse again. But then she exhaled and finally met my eyes. It doesn't matter. I felt something snap inside me. It matters to me. She flinched at the sharpness in my voice, but I didn't care. I needed to know. I needed to hear the name of the person who had been sneaking around behind my back, the person who had been touching my wife while I sat at home thinking she was out running errands. Her jaw tightened, and then, finally, she spoke. It's Ryan. The room seemed to tilt. The name hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the air from my lungs. Ryan, my coworker, the guy I had invited over for drinks, the guy I had joked with, the guy who had stood in my kitchen and laughed at my stories while my wife handed him a beer. I stared at her, my vision going red around the edges. You got to be kidding me. She didn't say anything. I turned on my heel, yanking the door open, barely able to think straight. She called my name, but I didn't stop. I walked straight out of the bedroom, down the hall, and out the front door, slamming it behind me so hard the windows rattled. I needed air. I needed space. Most of all, I needed to figure out exactly how I was going to make them both pay for this. I walked until my pulse stopped hammering in my ears, until the rage in my chest settled into something colder, something clearer. I had spent years believing Emily was my partner, my person, the one who would never betray me. Now, I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the street lights flickering above me, knowing that every moment of trust one had given her had been thrown away for Ryan, the man who had smiled in my face while sleeping with my wife behind my back. The anger hadn't faded. It had just sharpened into something with direction. I wasn't going to be one of those guys who sat around crying, begging for answers that didn't matter. I was going to end this on my terms. I pulled my phone from my pocket and scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering over a name I hadn't needed in a long time. Daniel, an old friend who worked in IT, the kind of guy who could get information most people thought was impossible to access. I tapped the call button and brought the phone to my ear, pacing along the curb as the line rang. Steve. His voice was groggy, like I had just woken him up. I need a favor. A pause, then a rustling sound as he shifted. What kind of favor? The kind where I need to know everything there is to know about someone. I need emails, texts, locations. I need proof. Daniel sighed. Who are we talking about? Emily. Another pause, longer this time. Jesus, man. Are you sure you want to go down this road? I clenched my jaw, gripping the phone tighter. I don't have a choice. There was silence, then a resigned sigh. All right. Send me her number, her email, anything you've got. I'll see what I can find. I ended the call without another word, my heart pounding with something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but close. If Emily thought she could lie her way out of this, she was about to get a reality check. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to destroy any chance she had of denying what she had done. I stood on the sidewalk for another few minutes, my mind racing through the next steps. I needed more than just proof. I needed a plan. Confronting her had been the first step, but it wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel what I felt. I wanted her to sit in the wreckage of our marriage, knowing she had been the one to burn it down. And Ryan, I wasn't about to let him walk away from this like nothing happened. He was going to regret every second he had spent with her. I turned around and headed back toward the house, my hands still shaking slightly, though whether it was from anger or anticipation, I wasn't sure. When I stepped inside, the house was silent. The bedroom door was still shut, but I could hear faint movement inside. She was probably pacing, probably waiting to see what I was going to do next. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat at the table, staring at the wood grain as I took a slow sip. I wanted her to come out first. I wanted to see what excuse she would try now that she knew I wasn't just blindly accepting her lies. A few minutes later, the door creaked open. I didn't look up as she stepped into the kitchen, her footsteps hesitant. She was testing the waters, trying to gauge how much trouble she was in. "Steve," she started, her voice quieter now, less defensive. I took another sip of my beer, still not looking at her. "You finally ready to be honest?" She shifted, her hands fidgeting at her sides. "Already told you." I let out a short laugh, cutting her off. "No, Emily, you told me what you thought I would believe. There's a difference." She let out a breath, stepping closer to the table. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But..." I finally looked at her then, meeting her eyes. "But what? You want to explain how it wasn't really cheating? That it didn't mean anything? That it was a mistake?" Her jaw tightened, and for a second, she looked like she was about to argue, but then she dropped her gaze, exhaling sharply. "I don't know what you want me to say. I want the truth," I said, setting my beer down with a thud. "I want to know why you threw away our marriage for him." She looked up again, something flickering in her expression, guilt, shame, maybe even regret. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she admitted. "It just did." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping. "That's not an answer, Emily." She rubbed her temples, clearly frustrated. "I don't know, okay? It started out as nothing. Just talking. He was easy to talk to. And then it escalated." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "And you never thought to stop? Never thought about what it would do to me?" She swallowed hard, her throat working. "I did. But by then, it was already too late." I let the silence stretch between us, watching as she shifted uncomfortably under my stare. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm, almost too calm. "It's over, Emily." Her eyes widened slightly. "Steve, I'm not doing this," I said, pushing back my chair and standing up. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." She took a step closer, desperation creeping into her tone. "We can fix this. We could go to counseling. We can..." "No," I cut her off. "You don't get to cheat on me for months, and then decide you want to fix things when you finally get caught." She opened her mouth again, then closed it, her hands clenching at her sides. She had thought she could control this, that she could talk her way out of it like she always did. But this time, she had nothing left. "I'll be moving my stuff out tomorrow," I continued. "I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you. And you sure as hell better not try to make this my fault." She flinched like I had slapped her. "Where are you going?" "Doesn't matter," I said, grabbing my keys from the counter. "But you won't have to worry about me being in your way anymore." I turned and walked out the door before she could say another word, the night air hitting me like a slap. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Ryan was next. I drove without a destination, my hands gripping the wheel, so tightly my knuckles ached. The night felt heavier than usual, but I wasn't letting my mind wander. I had one thing to focus on now, and that was Ryan, the man who had pretended to be my friend, who had smiled in my face while sneaking around with my wife. I wasn't the kind of man to sit back and let things happen to me. He thought he could take something from me without consequences. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. I pulled into the parking lot of the bar where Ryan usually went after work. I had been here with him before, back when I was stupid enough to believe he was just a coworker, just a guy I could grab a beer with. That was before I knew he was fucking my wife. I sat in my car for a moment, waiting, watching. It didn't take long. Ryan's car was parked in its usual spot, and sure enough, a few minutes later, he stepped outside, laughing with a couple of the guys from the office. He looked relaxed, like his life was normal, like he hadn't spent the last few months screwing me over. I got out of my car and walked toward him, my steps even, my heartbeat steady. He didn't see me right away, too busy checking his phone. I wondered if he was texting Emily, trying to figure out how bad things had gotten. Maybe she had already warned him. Maybe he thought he was safe. Ryan, I called, my voice carrying just enough edge to make him look up. His eyes flicked to mine, and for a split second, I saw it. The realization, the shift in his expression. He knew. He knew why I was here. His smile faltered, but he tried to play it off, slipping his phone into his pocket and taking a step forward like nothing was wrong. "Hey, Steve," he said, forcing a casual tone. "Didn't expect to see you here." I stopped a few feet in front of him, my hands at my sides, my body calm. "Yeah, I'm sure you didn't." The guys standing next to him shifted awkwardly, sensing the tension. Ryan glanced at them, then back at me. "What's going on, man?" I tilted my head slightly, studying him, letting him sit in the silence for a second too long. "You really want to do this here?" Ryan's throat bobbed as he swallowed, his fake confidence flickering. "Do what?" I took another step forward, lowering my voice just enough that only he could hear me. "You know exactly what, you piece of shit." His face twitched, just slightly, and I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to decide if he should deny it, if he should lie to my face like Emily had. But then he made a mistake. He glanced away for just a second, his body tensing like he was ready to run. I grabbed his collar before he could move, yanking him forward just enough that his balance shifted. His hands flew up, trying to pry mine away, but I wasn't letting go. "You slept with my wife," I said, my voice low but firm. "And you thought I wouldn't find out?" The guys standing nearby took a step back, one of them muttering something under his breath. Ryan let out a nervous laugh, his hands still gripping my wrist. "Steve, listen." I shoved him backward, making him stumble, his back hitting the side of his car. "No, you listen. You think this is over? You think you just get to walk away from this?" Ryan's hands went up, his voice hitching. "I'm sorry, okay? It just happened." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "It just happened." I repeated, shaking my head. "That's the best you've got." He exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. "Look, man, I know I screwed up. I didn't mean for this to happen." "You didn't mean for it to happen?" I cut in, my voice rising. "What? Did you trip and fall in my wife's bed?" He flinched, his eyes darting toward the other guys who were now pretending not to be there. I could see the fear creeping in now, the realization that there was no easy way out of this conversation. "You think an apology fixes this?" I continued, stepping closer again. "You think you could just say sorry and we go back to normal?" Ryan shook his head quickly. "No, man, I don't. You're going to regret this." I interrupted, my voice cold. "I promise you." He let out another shaky breath, his hands trembling slightly. "Steve, please, don't do anything stupid." I smiled then, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, I'm not the one who did something stupid. That was you." I stepped back, my hands loosening at my sides. He was scared now, and that was good, but fear wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel the weight of this every single day. "You're done at work?" I said, watching his face pale. "I already sent everything to HR. Every email, every message, all of it. I hope screwing my wife was worth your career." His breath hitched, and he took a half step forward, his voice desperate. "Wait, Steve. I also made sure your girlfriend knows." I continued, ignoring him. "In fact, I sent her every single picture you and Emily ever exchanged. She didn't seem too happy about it." Ryan's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. I could see it now, the moment it all crashed down on him, the realization that his life wasn't just going to go back to normal. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, turning slightly. "Emily? She's all yours. I don't want her anymore." I didn't wait for his response. I didn't need to. I walked back to my car, leaving him standing there, broken, panicked, his world falling apart piece by piece. As I slid into the driver's seat, I let out a slow breath, gripping the wheel tightly for a second before finally letting go. It was done. Emily had lost her husband. Ryan had lost everything. And I was finally free.